Yes, I have measured my dick with this. My ego is still crushed.
Yeah, buddy. Lightweight, baby!
What's up, guys? I'm Josh and I lift things, and I'm here to talk about body fat. How to measure it. Now, most people, when they start a diet, they create some arbitrary goal, like, I want to hit 20% body fat before I start cutting. And personally, I hate goals like this for tons of different reasons. You should just bulk until you're unhappy with your body composition, or until you're too tired of eating. Or maybe you know how long you'll have to diet in order to look good for summer or vacation or whatever else. The issue with estimating your body fat at home is that tons of things can actually just mess up your estimation. Through genetics, maybe you store a lot of fat in your face, leading you to think that you're a higher body fat percentage than you actually are. Maybe you have bloat from bad diet, bad hydration, high estrogen, or tons of other factors. Just looking at yourself in the mirror isn't that accurate. So how the hell do we figure out what body fat percentage we actually are? Well, there's numerous ways, some better and also more expensive than others, but none of them are going to be perfect. Most men tend to start showing abs around 12 to 15%-ish body fat, while most women will start showing abs closer to 18 to 20% body fat. I don't mean that you'll have a ripped six-pack at that level, just that you'll start to see the outline of abs. So if you have to look in the mirror, that's a good enough approximation for most people. But what are the tools you have available in order to get a more accurate representation? The main ones are measuring tapes, body fat charts, skinfold calipers, DEXA scans, BIA and BIS devices, and then even those weird bod pods that you see around. Now, each one of these has pros and cons, and each one comes with an associated rate of error. And keep in mind, that rate of error is only applicable when it's done by a professional. For instance, if you use skinfold calipers, the rate of error is going to be much, much higher. You have not been trained to do so. With that being said, even the margin of errors that I reference when I bring up each individual tool, expect them to be a little bit higher. So finally, let's break down the most common ways to measure your own body fat. First off, body fat percentage charts. I'm sure you've seen these everywhere, and I'll throw some up on screen. Is my editing good enough? Are they here yet? So you have an idea of what I'm talking about if you haven't seen them. They give different percentages and different pictures of people so you can get a base idea. This is the cheapest and the quickest method. I mean, it's literally free and it's one Google away. It is also the most inaccurate. Not only will you be off comparing yourself to the charts are often wildly inaccurate themselves. So many things can change how someone looks in a photo. Their skin tone, the lighting, the angle, do they have a pump or not? Did they hydrate enough? Did they get enough carbs? So many things influence this that it's really hard to just get one transient photo of someone and then say they are this percent body fat. And who knows if the people who got those pictures taken even stated what body fat percentage they were. It's possible that the chart maker just applied some random number to random pictures. This is one of the worst ways to go about it, in my opinion. That being said, it's so cheap and wildly available that it's really hard to pass up. I actually have a scheme if I'm ever a larger YouTuber to kind of crowdsource a giant body fat percentage chart. I would try to pay for DEXA scans for people, and then I would try to make sure that everything was systematic. The lighting was the same. They had the same pump protocol, the same hydration, and everything else. But that's a long ways down the road, though it would be handy. For the next way to measure your body fat percentage, we have a measuring tape. You can use whatever you want. You don't need necessarily a fancy one like this. It wraps around in there, so you can put something in and then tighten it. Yes, I have measured my dick with this. My ego is still crushed. These have gotten really, really popular over the last couple of years, especially thanks to the United States Navy. They use a few different measurements to get a rough idea on body fat percentage. They take someone's height and their weight, and then the measurements of their neck and their navel, which just means their waist around their belly button, to get a somewhat accurate prediction of body fat. Some calculators will also include the measurement of your hips, which is around your butt at the widest part, but most of the time this is kind of excluded. This has a margin of error of roughly 2 to 5%. In the description below, I'll list one of these calculators that you can use yourself if you want to check it out. So this is the second cheapest option and actually works surprisingly well. I mean, this thing came free with another device that you'll see later. I'm sure you can pick up a similar one for $3. Obviously, there's a kind of high margin of error, but it's so cheap, it doesn't matter that much. What's really important to realize with these inaccuracies, as long as something is accurately inaccurate, it doesn't matter. Let's say using the US Navy body fat calculator, you end up being 20% body fat. And let's say you were actually 18. Well, regardless, if you lose 2% body fat, sure, you'll actually be 16, but this will read 18%. That's good enough for most people. It's still something that you can easily track and see the progress of, and that's what's important. Now, pretty similar to these circumference measurements, you can also get a 3D body scan done. These are infrared and do the same exact thing. They get a accurate measurement of your certain body parts, and then they throw into a calculator and they spit out a number. These are pretty rare and rather expensive, but it is an option if you have the means to do so. I would just stick with this. Next up is the skin fold calipers. So with these, you take a pinch of skin from a specific location, and then you go in and you pinch yourself, and then you read this little thing right here. And wherever that is, you then take that measurement. The most common way to use skin fold calipers is either a 3-site or a 7-site test, and these sites are dependent on your gender. More locations is more accurate because some people tend to store body fat in different places, but these come with a skill curve. You have to pinch the fat and along with your skin in a proper way going in a proper direction. You then have to pinch it with this right in the middle of that fold, not at the base and not at the apex. You then have to let it even out in case the thing jiggles a little bit, and then you should do that 3 or so times per location in order to take an average of all those measurements to then get a somewhat accurate thing. Now, how accurate is it? It also depends on what calculator you throw it into. If you use one for the general population, it's going to read something obscenely low. This right now puts me at about 18% body fat. This put me at 6. I'm not fucking stage ready. I am not 6% body fat. Now, again, that could be my lack of skill, or more accurately, my girlfriend's, because there's no way doing the 7-site test you're going to be able to get accurate measurements on some of these spots. Now, here are the spots you would test for a woman on a 3-site location: the triceps, the area above the hip bone, and either the thigh or the stomach. For the women 7 test, you use those past 4 locations, and then you use the chest, the area right underneath the armpit, and then behind the shoulder blade. The main 3-site tests for men are the chest, the abdomen, and thigh, or chest, triceps, and underneath the scapula. And then the 7-site test for men is the above 5 plus your hip and underneath your armpit. Again, in the description below will be linked a couple different calculators, as well as a spreadsheet that uses a bunch of different ones so you can get a kind of more generalized idea. Again, this is a super cheap and super quick way to do it, although depending on the type of test you want to do, you probably need an additional person. This cost me about $15 on Amazon, so it's rather cheap. And came with this, so twofer. Their margin of error is about 3 to 5%, but again, just assume that's higher, especially if you're performing the test on yourself. This is probably the best way to get your body fat measurement at home. It's very cheap, and when you learn how to do it properly, it's rather accurate. One downside is you do have to be willing to get your skin pinched, which it doesn't hurt, but in some places can be rather uncomfortable, or some people don't like having that feeling of being touched whatsoever, and in which case, maybe stick with the measurements or the body fat charts. So next up, we have DEXA scans, DEXA, or sometimes shortened to DXA. This stands for Dual Energy X-ray Absorptiometry. These are all the rage, especially if you watch a lot of like bodybuilder content. They'll be talking about their DEXA scores. Essentially, you just get shot up with a low dose of ionizing radiation. Not too much, about as much as you'd be subjected to with about 3 hours of just everyday living. In the medical field, it's typically used to diagnose osteoporosis, but for what we need to use it for is to basically figure out the difference between your lean body mass and your fat mass. Now, lean body mass isn't just muscle, it's also water and bone and some other shit, but it does a good enough job. It's remarkably accurate, with some places even saying it has a margin of error of about 1%, but a more typical reference range is about 2 to 3%. The issue is you have to find a place that actually provides it, and then you have to schedule one, and then it'll cost typically about $200 to $300, sometimes even more. This is a pretty big barrier of entry for a lot of people, but it could be useful if you want to see what your peak leanness is, maybe right before a competition or a photo shoot, or if you just have the money to spend. So next up, we have hydrostatic weighing, otherwise known as hydrodensitometry. Essentially, it estimates body fat based on your body's density. You get weighed, you then try to force out all the air that you can, and then you go underwater and you get weighed again. They use some weird equations to work out a rough estimate of body fat percentage, and when done perfectly, can give you a margin error of about 2%. But again, it's very expensive and probably harder to find than DEXA scans these days. Another device that's been creeping up recently is the bod pod, which is the main brand of a type of device that does air displacement plethysmography. I've never heard of that term before. It's quite similar to the hydrostatic weighing, but rather than doing it in water, you do it in air. Once again, very expensive, pretty rare, although it is getting more common, and gives an error range of roughly 2 to 4%. Next up, you have the BIA and the BIS devices. These stand for Bioelectrical Impedance Analysis and Bioimpedance Spectroscopy. BIA basically sees how your body responds to small currents. So there's little electrodes that pass something through you, and then more electrodes that pick it up on its return trip. These signals move move easier through muscle rather than fat. So depending on the round trip time, it can then get a rough estimation of body fat. These devices are notoriously awful. Think like the scales that you stand on and then give you a body fat estimation. BIS devices use more current than BIA, as well as higher and lower frequencies, which leads some people to believe that they are a little bit more accurate than BIA. But they still have a pretty high margin of error, about 5%. In a similar vein, EIM, or electrical impedance myography, also uses small currents. But rather than send it throughout your entire body, it instead does it in more isolated regions. So you have to use it similar to how you would use a skin fold caliper. I do not recommend these whatsoever. They're not super expensive, especially for shitty ones, but for good ones it is kind of expensive, and they're just inaccurate. More so than just measuring yourself or getting a cheap pair of calipers. And now finally, we have the creme de la creme of measuring your body fat percentage. This gold standard is known as the multi-compartment model. There's two main variants that exist, the 3-compartment and the 4-compartment. This test has multiple tests all wrapped up in it. You get good measures of body mass, body volume, body water, bone content, and they use a combination of ADP, BIS, DEXA, and even more to get a comprehensive view of your entire body's composition. This culminates to a margin of error of under 1%. I don't even know how to estimate a price on this, but a lot. I also don't know how you would rationalize this really in the first place, but far be it from me to tell you how to spend your money. And guys, that is the video. Ow, fuck. It wasn't worth it. Seriously, if you want to measure your body fat percentage at home, you can either just look at a chart or use the mirror test, or if you want to be a little bit more accurate, use a measuring tape or a skin fold caliper test. They're extremely cheap, very easy to get, and very quick to do and get a rough approximation. It doesn't really matter how accurate it is. What matters is that it is accurately inaccurate. If you like this style of content, do me a favor, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, algorithm. If you really like this style of content, you can follow all of these socials down below. It helps support me. Join the Discord, join the subreddit, check out all the exclusive content over on all the shorts, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube clips, everything. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.